Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge & Company. Ghita Schwarz, an attorney with the Center for Constitutional Rights, recently wrote in The Nation magazine that New York is the capital of immigrant America. It is, she said, a beacon of hope to millions of people who are already here and want to come. And Mayor Bloomberg says we're the best. Ghita is my guest, and I want to know, are we the best? Why are we the best?
Well, I mean, I think the story is mixed in New York. It's certainly the case that rhetorically we frame ourselves as extremely pro-immigrant, and I think a lot of people who live here, not politicians, think of ourselves as a very embracing city for immigrants. We have some pretty decent local laws that sort of limit the power of the federal immigration authorities to detain people who haven't really committed any crimes. We have many sort of protections for immigrants who are going to the police to report crimes, who are going to school, who are accessing the Administration for Children's Services. So we have this sort of long local history of protecting immigrants from federal authorities. That said, we do have a lot of local policies and practices that can really be said to be extremely harsh on immigrants. New York is a very hard place to be poor. It's a very difficult place to be unemployed or to have sporadic employment, and many of the sort of difficult lives that people lead because New York is so difficult to live in, just financially, are exacerbated for immigrants, especially those who may not have status in this country.
Some of our laws were aimed basically at diminishing the impact of some of the ICE regulations?
That's right. Generally, one of the ways that I think New York has been really pretty good, and has been good for years predating the existence of ICE. ICE is now what we thought of as INS, Immigration and Naturalization
Service.
Service.
For what? Immigration?
It's Customs Enforcement.
Right.
It's sort of a new name brought on by the creation of DHS, Department of Homeland Security, after 9/11.
It's one of the biggest disappointments of mine with the Obama administration. I can't figure out why it has adapted those policies.
Well, it's pretty astonishing. I mean, right now we're all talking about immigration reform and the possibility that many people could have the opportunity to get legal status who didn't before. But people don't seem to be aware that Obama has has deported people in record numbers. Month by month, he has far exceeded George Bush. There's an estimate, I think from DHS itself, that in August of 2012, he had deported 1.4 million people. 200,000 of them are parents of U.S. citizen children. It's really an incredibly devastating policy, and it's happening at the same time that he's very supportive of immigration reform. It's a very contradictory situation.
Yeah, and what they do, ICE does, is what? What we've done is protected people from ICE's access to arrests. Is that what it is?
Well, there's a variety of things that have happened. I mean, actually, predating, really since the time of Ed Koch, we had some local executive orders that prevented our city agencies from reporting people to what was then INS. So you went to report a crime to the police, or you went to register your child for school. Supposedly you weren't supposed to get reported to the Immigration Service. And successive mayors, Democrat, Republican, Independent, have all renewed and kept that consistent. In recent years, as ICE has become much more of a force nationally, and as the Secure Communities program has really just sort of devastated the interior. I mean, I think the border was always, there was always a lot of activity from what is now called the Border Patrol. But as ICE has sort of come into the interior and done a lot of very heavy enforcement activities, New York City has done some pretty good work trying to limit their access to people who are arrested or picked up for minor crimes, and get them access to sort of choices before they interview with ICE. And those are city council passed laws that Mayor Bloomberg has signed. And in fact, He recently said we're the most immigrant-friendly city in the country, as he signed off on this pretty decent protection for people who are picked up by the police and in jail. The offset of that, of course, is that we have an enormous number of NYPD, New York Police Department policies that are resulting in arrests and stops and frisks of almost entirely minority communities, Black and Latino people. And that in and of itself is causing an enormous number of people to fall into the system.
So this old stop and frisk thing is affecting an immigrant population.
Oh, of course.
And if they stop somebody and they're undocumented, what do?
Well, supposedly New York City police are not supposed to inquire into status if the only illegality they suspect is being undocumented, which is not actually a crime. It's a civil violation.
If they find marijuana?
Well, that's the thing. That's a crime that's going to get you arrested, and that can put you into the system and start the whole chain rolling.
Because we have a lot of people, don't we, that are in federal detention, and these being held as undocumented.
I mean, an enormous number of people are held in federal detention. The bed rate has gone up every year. Some of them are the result of the Secure Communities program, where people are sort of transported from local police arrest jails and transported into federal detention. Some are through ICE and Border Patrol actions, whether they're raids or work site inspections, that kind of thing. And the federal detention system is an extremely draconian.
It's all privatized,
crushing.
Isn't it?
An enormous amount of it is privatized. It has conditions that most Americans aren't aware that we're holding people in this way. Unlike criminal defendants, immigration detainees don't have the right to appointed counsel. So if they can't afford an attorney, they don't have one. And they're also very vulnerable to shady attorneys or non-attorneys who are representing them and not really doing a very good job. It's a very different scheme. It's kind of this whole secret detention world that I think many Americans would be really shocked by.
It's incredible. There's a big center in Elizabeth that had always been subject. Is that the major one for this area?
You know, there used to be a few. There used to be a couple in Queens. Elizabeth is probably the closest one, but a lot of the immigration detention work is farmed out to local jails, where local jails have federal space and sort of a combination, very patchwork system where every detention center is completely different, and you can go to a local county jail, and there'll be a whole portion which is for immigrants, and they're getting money from the federal government to fill those beds. So you think about what those incentives are.
And then the other NYPD policy of surveillance is another one that is very troublesome, isn't it, to our community?
Yeah, well, my organization is actually involved in a lawsuit against the NYPD, not just for stop and frisk, but also for a separate issue, which is also related, which is the Bloomberg administration has a police department policy. Until now, it was a secret program to surveil Muslims, not just in New York City, not even just in the tri-state area, but really in a very far-ranging geographical way. And in
the New York City Police Department did that?
Yes, our case is actually on behalf of New Jersey residents.
What do we do? We're asked to come in, or what?
New Jersey, I believe, found out about it when the rest of us did. They basically, it's this very blanket program from a unit of the NYPD called the Demographics Unit. And basically, it's set up to spy on any and all Muslims. There's no remote attempt to make any distinction about who they're spying on. So the only thing that all these entire group in New Jersey has in common is that they're Muslims. They're African-American Muslims in Newark. They're Pakistani immigrants in other suburbs. They spy on a girls' school. They infiltrate, very frighteningly, Muslim student associations at Rutgers. You know, in New York City, they've been doing it all over our local New York City colleges and universities. And if you think about that, you know, what a typical college graduate's experience was like in school. You know, people go to religious organizations in school. They want to, you know, express themselves religiously. They want to talk to friends, and it becomes this incredibly terrifying experience where you don't know if the person you're talking to or the person who just struck up a conversation with you is doing it for the purpose of finding out what you're up to.
So does that mean, I mean, the Sikhs, when they go to worship, they're being watched?
That's exactly right. The demographics unit has a program of putting informants and spies in mosques, in any kind of, I was about to say in any kind of sort of religious setting you could imagine, except it's not just religious settings. It's also schools, halal, food shops, they spied on a couple of car repair places. I mean, they really have an enormous reach and no...
so it's another dimension to racial profiling.
It's very, very related.
Which has not enraged a large group of people.
Well, I mean, more and more there's a lot of sort of engagement and publicity about it. I mean, it really is what I imagine people went through during the Red Scare, where you don't know if the person that you're talking to is the person that's going to get you in trouble or really just wants to be a genuine friend. It's an
this is all the city. This is not national.
This is the NYPD doing it, not limiting itself to New York City. The NYPD really believes in itself as this major quasi-military force, and they don't feel that the borders of New York City are enough to keep
Is this in court now?
Yes. Well, Center for Constitutional Rights, along with a group in California called Muslim Advocates, sued the NYPD. We're going to be in court in New Jersey. The city has moved to dismiss, and we're waiting to hear
So how long does this take? I mean, when we find out about this, and then you decide you're going to have a class action, and you go to court. How long does it take to come up with a verdict that will...
I mean, it can take years and years and years. The stop and frisk case, which my colleagues are litigating at Center for Constitutional Rights, I think they filed in 2008, but it was developed over many years prior to that.
Is that the case that's pending now?
Yes, the case that Judge Shinlin
Right.
the trial ended after 9 weeks.
So we can assume that we'll have a verdict when? This year?
I believe the judge has said promptly, and that's as far as she'll go, which is very wise, because I think it feels different on the other side of the bench what prompt means. So she's, but you know, it's a very important case that deals with, you know, this enormous, more than decade-long program of racial profiling where something like 87% of the people stopped are Black or Latino. And purportedly, the city has said the purpose is to get guns off the street. 99.85% of the time, they don't find a gun. And you're talking about stopping millions of people over the course of this time, hundreds of thousands of people every year. And it really changes the lives of mostly young, mostly male, Black and Latino
people. And you add another dimension when it picks up somebody who's undocumented who may have something that's a little off, right?
Well, it adds. There's so many there's so many communities that are affected by it. Immigrant communities. There's you know, young people are obviously especially affected by it. You know, many lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender groups have been, you know, particularly targeted in ways that feel completely inappropriate. It's really an amazing blanket policy that doesn't actually result in capturing weapons or capturing contraband, and only results in harassing an entire generation.
You've written a novel in addition to doing all this other work called Displaced Persons. And I assumed, and I think you said, that it is partly from your family experience.
Well, yes, nothing in there resembles, and any resemblance to any person real is coincidental. I did take something from family stories. My parents were both born in Eastern Europe, and they were both in the Displaced Persons camp that's featured in the novel, which was, the Displaced Persons camps were refugee camps that were set up right after World War II largely, not entirely, but largely in Germany by the Allied forces. And it's a very interesting thing to see the immigration debate that's going on now.
I was going to ask the connection and the empathy that I feel that you have for people who are in transition between all these different cultures. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think now you think of sort of displaced persons or people who came in the post-war era as very welcomed by the United States, and we couldn't wait to get all these Eastern Europeans, especially the Jews, and it's like, no, that's not what happened at all. And the rhetoric at the time was really astonishingly similar to what that kind of the anti-immigrant rhetoric you hear now. On the one hand, there was this fear that the refugee population was going to alter the character of the United States and was going to be sort of lazy and not with our values, and they were just sort of indolent laying around these refugee camps. And then on the other, at the very same time, there was a lot of fear that they were extremely hardworking and they were going to take people's jobs. And that's exactly what you hear now. I mean, you hear this about immigrants now, that they're feeding off the welfare system, but also working these incredibly difficult jobs for very low pay. And you'd think you wouldn't be able to hold those two thoughts about the same group of people at the same time, but in fact all of our immigrant history has been anti-immigrant forces holding those two thoughts at the same time.
Does it make the immigrants, once they're here, stronger? I mean, when you think about what it takes for an individual to leave a culture, to come here, and what we're talking about now are people who are coming here without the law on their side, and then living with the fear. It's an incredible. What does it take inside? It's an incredible thing, isn't it?
I mean, I can't imagine it. I mean, moving from one neighborhood to another in Brooklyn is sort of a traumatizing thing, for people who've lived here all their lives. And if you think about sort of what migration is generally, it takes a lot of moxie and bravery to go from a rural area to a city, and then to go from a city to another country, especially one where for many immigrants they don't speak the language. I mean, it's really an astonishing act of bravery and hard work and I mean, it's a really incredible experience to do that. Many people who come here and are undocumented come here legally. They come with visas, they overstay their tourist visas or student visas, but many people also come through the border or through sort of some kind of smuggling transport, and it's amazing what they go through with incredible. I mean, there's an enormous amount of incredibly terrifying trafficking and debt to traffickers or debt to smugglers that many people come with. They're coming with these incredible burdens, and many of them are coming here in order to send money back home. I mean, a lot of the countries from which our immigrants come, they're surviving many of their families because our immigrants are sending money home, and it's just an incredible thing to do that, and it's an incredibly lonely experience for a lot of people, just coming into a new environment without your family, without your culture, struggling just to buy a cup of milk. It's a really amazing thing to be able to do that. And our country sort of struggles with this idea of we should be honoring that. That's who we are. And also, well, we're already here, and that was for us.
You're a litigator?
Yes.
So do you litigate on behalf of individuals too?
Yes, I mean, we do, at Center for Constitutional Rights, we do impact litigation. So some of our cases are class action cases like the stop and frisk case. Others are on behalf of sort of groups of individuals, sometimes organizations that want to sort of see some change and are using the courts as one of those tools. And we try very hard to work with organizing groups and activists to make sure that the litigation piece is sort of a tool in the toolbox rather than the whole.
To organize and to really change the whole framework.
Yeah, I mean, well, because you may not win in court, and you still want your campaign to go on and to survive and to learn from it.
So it's a lot of connections and a lot of continuous discussions and strategy developing. And do you think that the the proposed legislation, which some people are very optimistic is passed, it's still going to leave the question of ICE and secure communities there,
Yeah.
right? It's going to create a new path to citizenship, so more people will have some hope.
It's going to create a very long path to citizenship, but I think, yes, the hope is that many, many millions of people hopefully would be able to legalize. But it comes with a bargain of, increased enforcement at the border, and it's not going to get rid of immigration enforcement. There will be many people who don't qualify and who will be subject to immigration enforcement, probably in ways that are even more hidden and frightening than they are.
I know you're not an expert on the legislation, and neither, I haven't really read the whole comprehensive thing, but it also has some employer restrictions or regulations too.
It's supposedly, one of the things that gets criticized a lot when we talk about immigration enforcement is that it seems that the sort of powerful people who are employing workers and frequently exploiting them very terribly never seem to get punished. And there's a raid on a workplace and all the workers get arrested. Sometimes in the Bush administration, they were getting
Deported?
Not just deported, but prosecuted for using a false social security number. The Obama administration has been, very focused on prosecuting immigration crimes as well. So in theory, it would be good to sort of take the focus away from the workers, but I think one of the things we don't really know about how it's all going to play out is how much of this is going to be enforcement and how much of it is really going to be a path to legalization. And I think one of the other things about it is an enormous amount of the effects of immigration policy are felt locally. So in New York City, where there's a lot of rhetoric and support for immigrants, where we're trying to pass a tuition assistance bill for young people, where there are an relatively enormous number of advocates to help people, especially young people, take advantage of some of the Obama policies. It seems, like things will be much better, but in other parts of the country where there's an enormous amount of hostility to immigrants, it's really like a completely different immigration regime. We have, New York City and New York State trying to sort of support immigrants, and we have states like Arizona and South Carolina and Georgia passing these very horrendous policies.
In New York, up until now, I don't think if you didn't have a green card, you couldn't get tuition assistance. Isn't that right?
I think it's probably slightly more technical than a green card, but yes,
if you were undocumented.
If you're undocumented. There were some actually very good local scholarship programs at City College, but we are a little bit late our state is a little bit late to the tuition assistance game.
Too bad. It's another one of those things that surprises you because we like to think we're not. The other thing is, can you be on public assistance? Can you get food stamps?
If you are undocumented, no. Citizens and lawful permanent residents and some small category of other immigrants like asylees can usually avail themselves of a certain kind of public benefit. But no, if you're undocumented, you can't. It's really a myth that there is some whole population of people without status who are accessing these services.
So let's go back to some of the people. You wrote about a young woman from China. Do you know how she is now?
I haven't kept in touch with her, but some of my clients I used to work at a wonderful youth services organization called The Door, where they had a legal office where an enormous amount of the legal work we did was immigration representation. And you see teenagers there from all over the world.
How did they get there? That's so interesting that they found The Door to begin with, isn't it?
Well, it's amazing because if you represent one young man from a certain province in Bangladesh and it works out for him, suddenly you have a dozen young men from that same province because they tell their friends about it, or someone they were living with has heard about it, and so an enormous amount of it is word of mouth. And the lawyers there do an enormous amount of outreach and also go to immigration court where some of the young people have been picked up and are in proceedings and represent them there. But it's a real, you really see working in a place like that just the incredible richness of living in New York, and what a powerful experience it is for a new American to meet all these other new Americans who had nothing in common with them before, or so they thought, to see the just incredible linguistic and cultural diversity of all these kids working together. It's a really impressive place.
In the New York City Office of Immigrant Affairs, I don't know if that's the formal title, they give a list, they help you where you go and everything. Do they refer people to places like the door?
I don't actually know the answer. I would imagine yes, because one of the things that the mayor's office wants to do is to sort of have a little bit more flow of access, and to have the services that in some cases the city is funding actually be used by the right people. And so I would imagine that's the case, but I don't really know how they function.
So do you get into the story of these lives of where people are living? How, if they're here undocumented, how do they have any money?
Yeah.
Where do they live? How do they survive? We're back again to the stamina or the resiliency of people who come here.
Yeah, I mean, for adults, I mean, you see a lot of very difficult living situations. There are a lot of people in New York who work and can get by even though they're undocumented, and live in very constrained circumstances, but live as families do. Yeah. There are quite a few young immigrants in foster care. There are quite a few young immigrants in sort of ad hoc situations, transient, going from place to place. So it's really a range.
So are you going to write another novel that will do the immigration part of it, current immigration part?
I am, in theory, writing another novel that I work on at night, and sometimes when I wake up early enough in the morning. And yeah, it has an immigration component to it.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, and when you've written it, I hope that you'll be my guest again.
Oh, I would love to do that. This was really enjoyable.
Thank you, Ghita Schwarz.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore? Please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.